See a red light? Butchy Poo is on the air. I go by Butch. My name is Terry David Silvercloud. You can do a search for me if you want to know more about me. Today is the 27th day of October 2018. It is, what is it today? Saturday. It's a gray and cool day in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I live. So I'm 74 years old, and I live alone. I'm pretty reclusive. I don't do sites like Facebook or Twitter. I deleted my Facebook account a couple of years ago. It just wasn't for me. It was becoming a cesspool of idiots from my point of view, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I don't have the time. In spite of the fact I live alone and being reclusive, I got lots to do. I keep myself busy painting and doing photography, and the websites which I use are YouTube and Flickr.com, which is a photo storage website. So that's about as social media as I get. And today I've been hurting a lot. I'm old. I have severe arthritis and I have pain management, but in the mornings the pain management, especially in bad weather or something, who knows, is not always working. So I try to occupy my mind by keeping busy painting or doing some exercises, or I don't do a lot of that, but I want to stay in shape. Painting or doing photography. I do a lot of selfies. And thinking, I think a lot. I'm into physics and theoretical physics, more particularly particle physics, and not just particle physics, but things from the electron on down. Although I have a serious interest in atomic physics, but my interest is the fundamental level of reality, and so I'm more interested in things smaller than the electron, and that gets into dark matter and dark energy and interesting things in physics called relativity. So today I'm talking about time. I'll mention time travel, and the main deal here is absolute time. Now, Isaac Newton, who was a very famous scientist who gave us much of our basis of much of our modern physics, especially the physical physics, motion. Physics is a study of energy, matter, and motion. So if any of those, any or all of the above are involved, energy, matter, or motion, physics is involved. That's what physics is about, studying those kind of things. So that really covers a lot. And if you're a physicist, you tend to understand quite a few things about chemistry, because you need to understand how atoms work and how molecules work. Where were I? So time, Isaac Newton, he observed long ago that we cannot know absolute time. We have nothing against which to measure it. So you have to start thinking about time, and time is a measurement of change, any kind of change. Now what that means is if you were extremely small, living on an atom, you would be measuring time in trillionths of a second as being normal. What we think a second as being, that's pretty normal, you're used to that. But if you're on an atom, a second is a really long time, and a lot of things can happen in 1 second, and they do. So time is relative to how large you are, how big you are, and time is a measurement of change, of physical things, and of energy of any sort. So time is a measurement of changes of energy. And we use that to great effect now, because in the old days we had to use watching the sun go up and down and pendulums and stuff like that. But now we can measure the frequency of certain atoms that vibrate at certain frequencies, if they're, especially if they have an electrode stuck up their bum. So they'll vibrate at a pretty constant rate, and pretty much all digital clocks work off that particular principle, that you can make particular things vibrate at a certain rate consistently by applying voltage to them. So what your little digital clock and things are doing is they are measuring what's called frequency. And the frequency is how often one whole wave happens per unit of time, and we use a second. So if something had a frequency of 100,000 cycles, waves per second, that would be its frequency. And we could calculate the wavelength, this distance from here to there, by some simple division to see, just dividing 100,000 into the speed of light, and we would come up with how long this actually was. So light, what you perceive to be light around you, falls within a particular set of frequencies and wavelengths, and visible light falls into waves which are usually between about 400 nanometers, which is a billionth of a meter, to 800 nanometers long. So 800 nanometers would be getting really reddish, and 400 would be getting very bluish. That's how your brain would interpret it. Color is a perception of something going on up there. If you were an insect, you would be able to see extended wavelengths and frequencies, and how their brains are interpreting color, I have no idea. They may even be interpreting it in black and white, even though they're receiving it in color. What do I know? I'm not a biologist, I'm a physicist. So we're talking about time. So with your electronic watches, they're measuring how fast per second a little crystal vibrates, which happens to be very fast, which is good, because the faster it is, the more accurate the watch can be, and digital watches are quite accurate. They pretty much all qualify as being what is called a chronograph, which means they can keep time accurately to a fifth of a second or better. So absolute time is a measurement we can't seem to know, and Isaac Newton said we can't know absolute time, and this is why time travel is completely impossible, because time is not a place, time is not a thing, time is a measurement from where you are in space at this very moment to somewhere where you were in space at a particular length of time that you know. That's called relative time from now. So you can't just dial a thing to some absolute time and go to that time. You might even be in the wrong place, and space is a really big place. So you may end up at the right time and in the wrong place. And that's because nothing sits still. As you sit here right now listening to me yak on and on, our solar system is moving along with our galaxy, the Milky Way, at somewhere like 300 kilometers per second. So just as you're sitting here, you're actually moving at greater than 300 kilometers every second through space. And the galaxy isn't just sitting there like some big island in space rotating around. The entire galaxy is on the move, and we aren't really entirely sure how fast that is, but it's entirely possible the galaxy is moving at another 200,000 kilometers per second on its own, which would mean our velocity through space could be approaching, for all we know, 1,000 kilometers per second. We just, like absolute time, we seem to have no way of measuring it. So we measure everything relatively. When Newton was alive, he didn't know what light was, and he didn't know what a wave was. He knew what waves on water were, but he had no familiarity. I can't even say it. Too many somethings in there. You know what I'm talking about. He didn't know about radio waves and all that, and even Einstein, when he published his relativity in 1916, the whole idea of radio waves was all brand new. when Tesla had the idea that he could send energy through the air, he was correct. He just didn't quite grasp what he had done. But young Marconi came along and looked at what Tesla was doing, say, I got it. And he came up with radio. So Tesla invented radio and Wi-Fi, but he had nothing with which to measure against what he was doing, so he didn't really grasp what he was on to. He was very good with alternating current, and Tesla gave us our modern alternating current, and he designed. Westinghouse was having big problems with figuring out how this alternating current stuff worked, and Tesla designed the generators at Niagara Falls, which were like, it was a really big deal when they flashed them up. They couldn't be 100% sure it was actually going to work because they were so big. But it worked just peachy keen and still does, and Tesla's designs still work. So Tesla was onto the idea of waves and stuff, but he didn't totally grasp what he was onto because quantum physics was a long way away from being invented. And when Einstein started looking at time and the speed of light, he realized that everything had to be relative, and he worked out some equations so that if you knew where you were at a certain time and how fast you were going, you could predict a whole lot of things about what it would be like when you arrived where you were somewhere else. And he didn't get it all quite right, but he made a really good stab at it. And I'm not going to get into what might be right or wrong with that. But when Einstein wrote Relativity in 1916, waves were all brand new, and he had to do a few hop, skips, and jumps to try and fit it all in, which he spent much of his life trying to do. And then he kept being stuck on light, and he gave us the concept of a photon, which is, it leads to all kinds of fallacies of ambiguity and things because people associate photons with light, but photons are a unit of energy. But they're a fortunate kind because they were amongst the first kind of units of energy that grasps the concept of a three-dimensional wave, or three-dimensional time-space wave became possible, which in Newtonian physics with vectors and even Einstein physics with forces ignores everything else except the force that's coming straight at you to blow you away, which is more easily measured than volumes of energy. So we're talking about time, believe it or not, we're talking about time. So Newton realized that absolute time was not possible to measure, or so he thought, and Einstein came up with methods of dealing with relative time, but not being he pretty much ignored Doppler effect when he created relativity because he just wasn't into waves. Doppler effect, he hadn't quite translated it in his head to light waves, that different colors were just nothing more than Doppler effect of isolating particular frequencies to a particular very, very specific color. Now we're getting really good at that with spectral analysis, and we look at all the colors because a particular frequency, a really discrete frequency of color, can tell you a whole lot about what something is made of. Like it could look at the microphone and tell you, well, I can tell you what kind of metals are in there just by the kind of particular frequencies we're getting back through our spectroscopes. So I want to make sure I get through your head that time travel is that's just a silly idea, and it's just completely impossible because time isn't a place, and it's not a place in time and space, and in quantum physics you could know a time and place and space, but you can't know how fast it's going at the time you know where it is. If you know how fast it's going, you can't know where it is. And that is a fundamental reason, even in quantum physics, why time travel it's not possible. because you cannot tune into a particular place in space, because you do not stay in the same place in space that you were a second ago. In 1 year, Earth travels, are you ready? 7 billion, with a B, billion kilometers through space. So every single year, Earth is 7, and that's just a minimum because we don't know how fast the galaxy is moving. But within the galaxy, within the Milky Way, our sun and planet moves 7 billion kilometers every year. So even if you had a star chart of the galaxy for today and you left Earth within our Milky Way, and you could travel at light speed and go and travel around for a bit, when you looked at your star chart to figure out where Earth was so you could get back to it, and you went there, Earth wouldn't be there. Earth would be somewhere else. So unless you had a homing beacon on Earth to tell you where to go, you could not get back home. It's that sophisticated. Now, I want to talk about this is theoretical physics, a theoretical way of measuring absolute time. There has to be a fastest, is that a word? I guess so, I'm going to use it. A most fast velocity that time could be, and we measure time in cycles per second. So 100,000 cycles per second, that ain't nothing. That, for some particular reason, which I have some ideas about, is the particular frequency at which radio waves suddenly easily start emitting from any kind of antenna. If I was to feed a radio wave at least 100,000 cycles or higher into this microphone, the microphone would start behaving like an antenna. So we measure frequencies much higher than 100,000 cycles per second. And in a Wi-Fi chip, here's a Wi-Fi chip, here's a Bluetooth chip. This thing is using frequencies so extremely fast that this wavelength is so extremely short that it fits in here with no problem at all, with room to spare. So there's a very, very wide range of frequencies, but there is a point in particle physics and even in quantum physics where we can't seem to find anything smaller. And in physics, we pretty much come down to calling that Planck's constant. It's a number that, as long as you're dealing with waves and you throw that in, everything will work out peachy keen. But you cannot get, when the wave is pretty much as small as you can get with no amplitude at all, Planck's constant is still there. So what is causing that? And if you start to think about it, we are electronic beings. When I talk, there are physical molecules vibrating in the air here, which are striking a crystal in these microphones, and the crystal is vibrating, and that's causing them to generate electricity, which is being amplified a tiny bit by my mixer before it goes on to my webcam. But the point I'm trying to make here is, from the time that crystal starts to vibrate at the speed of light, an electronic signal is traveling to my webcam and then being recorded, and now it's coming back to you. So nothing could get from the microphone to the webcam, and nothing could get from your ear to your brain, because your ear is a microphone. It works exactly the same way. There's a bunch of little things in there which are vibrating your eardrum, and there's a sensor on your eardrum that is detecting that, and it's causing electrons to jump. And every time an electron jumps, in what we would call space, even though I don't believe in true space. Every time an electron makes a certain jump, it's called a quantum leap. Quantum leaps are extremely small, but a photon of energy or a quantum of energy is involved, and it races to your brain at the speed of light, so there's a delay in time, not much between there and there, but from light travels at about 1 foot per billionth of a second, so if I touch my finger there, it would take about 1 nanosecond, 2 nanoseconds, 3 nanoseconds for the electrons to transmit that touch feeling to my brain. The point of it all here is, if you're looking at waves and you're looking at Planck's constant, there is your Planck's constant. It's an electron. If electrons were all touching each other, the way this electron could transmit information to this one would simply be to roll, just like a gear wheel. If it rolled half a turn that way, this one would have to go half a turn that way, half a turn this way. And every time it does it, gets back to one complete wave. It would be the same as if the single electron had made just one complete turn. And you'll see that come up in Einstein's E equals mc squared. If you think about it, it's just following the mathematical geometry for the area of a circle. And if you wanted to make it for a sphere, you would simply change it to 4/3 pi c cubed, and then you would not only be measuring the vector force, which is really all you care about, that's going to blow you apart from the atomic blast, but you would also be measuring the total amount of energy within the sphere of the blast at that exact moment. Absolute time, therefore, is really a measurement of the size of electrons, because we are electronic beings. Nothing exists. Your brain, when electronic function ceases in your brain, you're kaput. So we are electronic beings, and for us, all reality is the speed of light, because that's the speed at which electrons work, and that's an electron could spin 100,000 times a second, and you could measure that as a frequency of 100,000 turns per second, and in some cases that is the mechanism that's happening. The other thing that could happen is if an electron passed a certain point, say this point right here, 100,000 electrons went past that point per second, which would be very hard to do because it would require an extremely large amount of voltage, but they could. I'm not saying they can, it's just that it's very hard to push 100,000 electrons per second past a given point. So what happens with the speed of light is that when one electron is pushed into a circuit, they're all pushed out at a slight delay in time because of the distances here. So if one electron was pushed into here, at the speed of light, another electron would pop out over there. So electrons don't often move at the speed of light. Not saying they don't or can't, it's just that they prefer to either change their rate of spin or simply get out of the way by if this one decided it just didn't want to do anything, it could just simply move up that way, and this electron can move by, and this one would probably go the other way. This one would go down that way. It would just let this one go through, and these ones wouldn't really go anywhere. They could also work that way, and in large electronic circuits, because there's zillions of electrons moving, that is in fact what is happening, and it's these electrons constantly being pushed sideways out of their orbits, as it were, that is the resistance, and the resistance causes the wire, the physical motion causes the wire to heat up. Heat is just a wave slightly longer than a light wave, and if anything physical starts vibrating at that particular frequency, our nerves detect that as heat. So the heat in this room is vibrating my nerve cells at the frequency of heat. And if it doesn't, I'm going to start feeling really cold. And I don't have much body fat, so I feel I'm pretty fit for an old dude. No pain, no gain. Do your exercises, kids. Touch your toes once in a while, not too often because I find it hurts my back, but keep some light weights and just do something. Stay fit and watch the calories. This is a fat world. This world is a living hell. This world is out of control. That's why I do this. I'm trying to pass on some of my knowledge. So I try not to go over 30 minutes. I see I've yacked nearly 26 minutes now. So the main point of all this is that it's my belief that absolute time is the measurement of the physical side. It's set by the motion of electrons. That's how we measure absolute time. We can't measure any place in space absolutely with absolute notion because we are constantly on the move. But there is an absolute which sets time for us, and it's being caused by the fact that we are electronic beings. We require electricity for everything to work. We're just machines. We're biomechanical machines, and I've learned in my own age that we're entirely hormone driven. For all you young guys, it's your testosterone, and if you old dudes are having issues, you might qualify testosterone. That might be helpful. It has its dangers, so I'm just mentioning that much of your feelings, whether they are anger or happiness or sexual drive, are hormone driven, and if your body is having hormone issues, it ain't the ticker, it's your ticker's response to the messages coming in being caused by your various hormone levels. And of course this has nothing to do with absolute time, but I'm ADHD, so I'm also old. I'm 74. Jeez, I'm still alive. I can't believe it. So absolute time is a concept, and I'm trying to tell you that I think it's worth thinking about it being set by the physical size of electrons, and that both quantum physics, although I don't think anybody's actually tried to explain it that way before, quantum physics and the very basis of Schrodinger's cat should tell you there is no time travel because you don't even know where the cat is inside the box, yet alone whether it's dead or alive. So you can't go there, and even if you observe it, are you talking about the time you observe it, or are we talking about now? Because everything just keeps changing. Just like I'm moving around, nothing sits still, ever. I say gravity is push, not pull, and it's because everything is trying to come to rest, and it can't. And again, it's being caused by the fact that we have electrons, and electrons occupy space, and they don't like being where other electrons are, so they are constantly pushing away. Their little monopole magnets pushing in every direction, trying to get away from the other electrons. Get away from me. They're like me. I'm a recluse. I try to stay away from the barbaric humans. You can hate me if you want. What do I care? I'm old. This is one barbaric rock of a planet, and it's in a very sorry state. As a physicist, I can tell you there's some hard times coming, and the extinction has begun, and it'll do. Mother Nature will take care of it all. I expect the planet to lose, and this is entirely necessary. We're going on 7 billion people now, and 3 billion would be a good number, and I'm pretty certain that'll happen pretty quickly in the next century. That if not through some limited nuclear wars, there's going to be such massive climate change that billions of people are going to die of starvation anyway. That's just me talking. So I'm coming up to 30 minutes. Time to say goodbye. I do go on Terry David Silvercloud. Look me up. And I'm going to just say goodbye.